in Nectar of Devotion, or Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, we find there are 64 qualities of Krishna. And one of them is compassion. And what Rupa Goswami writes about compassion is one who cannot bear to see the sufferings of others. More or less in that language. Now, when Krishna does acts of compassion, according to Rupa Goswami's teachings, it's a stimulation for ecstatic love. There's 64 qualities, each one. It's in the Sanskrit word is udipan. And udipan means stimulation of ecstatic love. And where do Vaishnavas get their compassion from? They get their compassion from the same place everything comes from Krishna. And Vaishnavas exhibit compassion in a way that's different than those that are not. There's the material kind of compassion, caring for the suffering of others. And there's material compassion, and there's Vaishnava compassion. So we spent some time discussing what is Vaishnava compassion. General definition, because it is included in what you're going to see shortly. There's three elements. One is cognition. I understand your situation. A second is affective. I feel something about your situation. And the third is, I want to do something. Motivational. And little babies can't sit still. It's just not realistic. Unless they're asleep. When the child starts making noise again, you can do the needful, okay? You take the child and you go somewhere. Okay? One of the services to the community of mothers is when there's public programs, the child goes to another room. You don't wait for the noise to happen and then you take the child to the other room because it's disruptive. It's part of the service of being a mother. Service to the community. It's the assembly of devotees. Gora Bhakta Vrinda. So, cognitive, affective, and motivational. I want to do something. And because a devotee understands we're spirit soul, and because a devotee understands that we're within a body and a mind, Vaishnava compassion is holistic, meaning we take into consideration the needs of the body and the needs of the mind, but ultimately there's the need of the soul. And most importantly of all, is all three, whether it's this, that, or the other, Krishna is to be pleased. Because that's the life of devotion is. Pleasing Krishna is everything. We're going to hear another verse by Rupa Goswami shortly, but this is a nectar devotion, because you're all experienced devotees, so I could ask you, maybe I should ask you, of all the verses in nectar devotion, there's one verse that sums up the entire subject matter, or you could say the other way, the entire subject matter of nectar devotion, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is an expansion of one verse. It's all resting on one verse. What's that one verse? Ayavilasitushanyam jnana karma janavritam anukoyena krishna nushilanam bhaktir uttama. Very good. Again, an A in your exam. So what that means is a good definition, I explained this yesterday, a good definition is always both inclusive and exclusive. I gave the story. When Prabhupada came to America, he had kartals, his Bhagavatam, and Radha Krishna deities. But he didn't have a Mridanga. So after some time, some devotees were going to India, and he asked them to purchase one Mridanga and bring it back. But the devotees don't know what a Mridanga is. So Prabhupada explained. And a good definition is inclusive and exclusive. So he said, can you get a Mridanga? And it's a drum that has not just one head, but it has two. But there are two heads and not you play like this, you play like this. But one head is big and the other head is small. And some mridangas are made of wood, some are made of metal, and some are made of clay. I want one made of clay. And he then drew a picture of a mridanga. And then they got a mridanga. It's a really nice story. When they brought the mridanga, he was in Los Angeles, in his quarters in Los Angeles. And they were so happy. Mission accomplished. It didn't break. They brought the mridanga to Prabhupada. And you know what Prabhupada did? He was seated behind his desk. He got from behind his desk and paid obeisances to the mridanga. Took his uttariya, his upper cloth, and wrapped it around the mridanga. He said, this is Balaram. So later, when the devotees at the BBT in Los Angeles started making fiberglass mridangas, they called it Balaram Mridanga. Because the paraphernalia that's used in Krishna's service is an expansion of Balaram, including the mridanga. So a good definition is both inclusive and exclusive. So that verse that we just recited from Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it says what bhakti is. Bhaktir Uttama. First of all, bhakti is pure. Bhakti is Uttama. And the subject matter in Nectar of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is bhakti. But bhakti includes sadhana, bhava, and prema bhakti. So what we're doing is sadhana bhakti. And we're not pure. The bhakti is pure. And if we pursue bhakti in the way that Rupa Goswami teaches, it's uttam bhakti. Isn't that good to know? Just stay with it. But you have to be a follower of Rupa Goswami, not just wear tilak and say Hari Bol. You have to be a follower of Rupa Goswami. You have to be abiding by his teachings, and so he gives his teachings. What bhakti isn't is how that verse starts. We all know this one. Anya Abhilas Shunya. Abhilas means desire. Anya Abhilas is other desires. Other desires are Shunya. Shunyavadi. Zippo. Nada. Nothing. No other desires. Which are those other desires? Jnana karma, anavritam. Fruit of activity or mental speculation. One reporter asked Srila Prabhupada, Swamiji, how long does it take to be Krishna conscious? Immediately Prabhupada's answer, less than a moment. And then Prabhupada went on to say, in that less than a moment, two things. The tendency to be an enjoyer of sense gratification arising from fruitive activities, you have to give it up. And the tendency to try to understand truth by the power of mental speculation, you have to give it up. And then he said, generally people are attached to those two things, so generally the process is gradual. But less than a moment. So we're taking more than a moment because we're attached to one or both of those things, generally both. So that's what bhakti isn't. It's not sense gratification or mental speculation. So what is it? That's what it isn't. Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam. So this has direct bearing on the topic of compassionate speech, or receiving the quality that Krishna has. The quality that Krishna has is a stimulation for ecstatic love. And any living entity, any Vaishnava, may have a tiny little speck of the totality of what Krishna has. We derive whatever compassion, Vaishnava compassion, we have from Krishna. And those that aren't Krishna conscious have a distorted reflection of compassion, misplaced. We hear about that at the end. Misplaced compassion. So properly placed compassion is, we want to please Krishna. And that's bhakti. Anukulyena Krishna Anushilana. That's it, that's bhakti. Bhakti Ruttama. So what does that mean? It's a very important phrase, because the whole of what we do in Krishna consciousness is resting on those few words. So it's worth unpacking them a little bit. And then Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is more than a little bit, it's everything. Or the science of this, the Sindhu of Amrita, the nectar, the ocean of nectar of Bhakti Rasa. So I could spend easily 20 minutes unpacking that, but I'll just do it quickly. It's the cultivation, Anushilana, means cultivation. Read in the preface of Nectar Devotion, you'll find that word, cultivation. Bhakti is a sort of cultivation. Anushilana. And Shilana, Jiva Goswami explains, it's a verb that has a dhatu. Anybody know Sanskrit a little bit? Dhatu, root. And to understand a phrase, you need to know the dhatu of the phrase. And so he says, this is Jiva Goswami, Shil is the dhatu, and it has two parts. That which is moving, and that which is not moving. And the moving part is the body, like what you do, the contemplations within the mind, what you think about, that's moving, too much moving. And emotion, when you think about something, you feel something about that which you're thinking about. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. And our experiences. So that's the moving part. That's the shield, the moving part of shield. And the non-moving part is, doesn't matter circumstantially what's going on. There's some things that are just fundamental, not even deeper than values. Like parents are always interested, should be interested, in passing on the values of the family to their children. It's just part of parenting. There's something that's even more fundamental than that. Because values can change in the course of your life. But there's some things that are just like the bottom of the iceberg. You know, there's the behavior of the tip of the iceberg, and then there's values that drive behaviors, and then there's fundamental givens that doesn't matter what your values are. So for us, very simply, we're spirit soul. And even further, we're parts of Krishna, spirit souls that are parts of Krishna meant for his service. That's who we are. That's the shield part, the unchanging and the ever-changing part of shield. And Anu Jiva Goswami says, is constantly, not just practice, but consistent. Sadhana, bhava, and prema bhakti. Anushilana. And Krishna anushilana. Krishna should be pleased. He's the object. We're the subject. He's the object. We should be pleasing Krishna. And then the last is this anukolyena. Nice. I hope you don't mind learning some Sanskrit phrase, because it's the foundation of bhakti. So, anukolyena means it's the instrumental case. I'm not a Sanskrit scholar, so I ask some scholars. What does that mean? It's imperative. You can't have it. You can't have bhakti without it. And that's what's favorable for pleasing Krishna. So what Jiva Goswami explains is, for example, Shishupal and Kamsa. They were very Krishna conscious. They were always thinking of Krishna, but not favorably. That's the anukolyena. Krishna anushilana. Bhakti Uttama. So compassion is meant for the pleasure of Krishna. For a devotee, everything is for the pleasure of Krishna. There isn't something that isn't for the pleasure of Krishna. If there's no place for something for the pleasure of Krishna, like, intoxication or gambling or other activities that are just, you can't offer that to Krishna, so we just leave it to the side. But if there is something like compassion that we take, it's for the pleasure of Krishna. Always mindful, a little speck of the totality of Krishna's compassion. So we want to connect with Krishna and can offer that to Krishna. So whenever we're trying to just take this compassionate speech, this past weekend in the United States, there's one of our national holidays is Memorial Day weekend. So because it's a long weekend, we have this nice retreat in the Gitanagari farm. So I was presenting these topics yesterday and the rest of them, while Bir Krishna was presenting nonviolent communication. Have you heard that term up here in Canada? You're nonviolent people. Nonviolent communication. He has studied that for maybe 10 years, deeply, not superficially, and has customized it for devotees to receive and not just intellectually learn, but have the tools and role play and different things to help it go inside. So compassionate speech is the same as nonviolent communication, and to practice yoga of any kind, there has to be control of the mind. This is Rupa Goswami teaching in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu another very important verse. You know this one? Takshi Krishna Namadi Nabhaved Grayam Indriyai Sevanmukhi Jivado Svayameva Svaratyada. So, in short, the verse says, understanding Krishna isn't easy. But it's possible if you can control the senses, starting with the tongue. So any system of yoga, doesn't matter bhakti or any other, there must be control of the mind and senses. Conversely, without control of the mind and senses, it's not yoga. You won't go very far. You'll like that rowing the boat, but you leave the anchor in, you're not going to go very far. You have to let go or slacken the strong hold on lack of control of the senses and lack of control of the mind. And how to control the senses? Jiva Goswami teaches, starting with the tongue. And if you can control the tongue, you can more easily control the other senses. You can control the other senses, you can help control the mind, and then you can practice yoga in a way that's favorable to Krishna. It's a very nice package. So, with the tongue, there's two main functions. Prabhupada would speak on this verse many times. And the two main functions are tasting and vibrating. So, for us, the first part is really easy. Take Krishna Prasadam. No problems. Haribol, Krishna Prasadam ki jai. Now, controlling the tongue's tendency to speak. That's another one. But it should be done in such a way that is pleasing to Krishna. And if that mood of service connects with Krishna, because we know, who are we? We already did it. We're spirit soul. More than that, we're part of the Supreme Soul. More than that, we're eternal servants. Part and parcel of the Supreme Soul. Just have to connect that shield, that non-moving part of our existence. The bottom of the iceberg moves, the whole iceberg is going to move. Our behavior will change if who we are is very clear and we're operating from that position. Our speech then is for the pleasure of Krishna. And then we can control the other senses, and then we can control the mind, and then we can be pleasing to Krishna. At least we should move in that direction. And that's how you can affect, how in bhakti we can move in that direction. There's another very important verse that Rupa Goswami has written in Nectar of Instruction. Vacho Begam, Manasakroda Begam, Jiva Begam, Udarapasta Begam. If this word Begam, you're going to see it again in a moment, is urge. And notice there's 6, and 2 of the 6 have to do with sound. Vacho Begam. That's Vak is the speech. Manasakroda Begam. Jiva Begam. That's the tongue. There's that word. Not the living entity Jiva, but the tongue, Jiva. Jiva Begam. 2 out of the 6 have to do with the tongue. This verse, translated, says, one who can control these 6 is qualified to be a spiritual master for the whole world. So it's really important to control speech. And control speech should be in a way that's pleasing to Krishna. So you ready? Here comes Bhagavad Gita, chapter 17, text 15. And look at, there's this word Vega again. Anudvega karam vakyam. Vakyam is speech. Satyam priya hitam chayat. So, the word for word. Anudvega karam. Anudvega karam means not agitating. That's negative. Priya means pleasing, more than not agitating. Pleasing. So, this is speaking of the verse is about vak, or speech. So our speech should be pleasing to others, not agitating. And hitam means beneficial. So if you remember from how I began, that this definition of compassion has cognitive, affective, and motivational. So the hitam is beneficial. And priya and anudvega karam is emotional. You're concerned about the emotion of the other person. Satyam is you have to be truthful. it's not easy to be truthful in a way that's not displeasing to others and makes you dear to them, because sometimes you have to say things that are a little uncomfortable to hear. And how do you say things that are uncomfortable to hear, that are but satyam, that are truthful? It's this motivational part of hitam. It's beneficial, and the ultimate beneficial is Krishna. Now, how to do this is an art, and that's the part that dear Krishna Maharaj focused on, is the practical ways, the options that are at our disposal. That, there's the behavior, the tip of the iceberg part, the speech part, but there's the value part, and there's the non-changing part down here. Is we're Krishna's eternal servant, meant for pleasing Him. That's one of, and the value is we care, effective, we care about the welfare of others. We care about not just the welfare of people that aren't devotees yet, so we're really nice to them. And then there's devotees, so we're less nice to them because we're expecting them to be nice already. Anyway, it's one of those things that came up yesterday, and that is compassion. There's a tendency in the Hare Krishna movement, not just this place or that place or another place, that we're very careful in our dealings with new people, and we're perhaps less careful, take for granted dealings amongst the devotees. Yes? Yes? No? My understanding, when that topic came up last night, I said, I heard from Praharana that the whole of Canada took up this mandate or mission or whatever, this initiative of trying to encourage devotee care, and different people were given the assignment to extend care to this person, that person, or the other person, the whole of Canada, because we need to put something on this side of the pan scale, not just on the new devotee side of the pan scale. Devotee care is really important. All over our whole society is very important. So, this is text 15 from chapter 17, where the principles of compassionate speech are laid out. Here's the translation, and I'm going to read the purport. Austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic literature. And we should hear the purport of Srila Prabhupada, because it's important to know his purports. One should not speak in such a way as to agitate the minds of others. Of course, when a teacher speaks, he can speak the truth for the instruction of his students. But such a teacher should not speak to others who are not his students, if he will agitate their minds. This is a penance. That's this word, tapa. Whoops, in the Sanskrit. This is a penance as far as speaking is concerned. Besides that, one should not talk nonsense. When speaking in spiritual circles, one's statements must be upheld by the scriptures. One should at once quote from scriptural authority to back up what he is saying. At the same time, such talk should be very pleasurable to the ear. By such discussions, one may derive the highest benefit and elevate human society. You benefit and others benefit. Hitam. There is a limitless stock of Vedic literature, and one should study this. This is called the penance of speech. So these are scriptural references, just as Prabhupada is saying. It's what we're supposed to do in spiritual circles. Is when you say something, you support it on scriptural reference. So these are our scriptural references, and then we have, the reality of how people speak to one another. And the way people speak to one another is without necessarily understanding the other person, or how our words are going to impact the other person. And we end up with non-communication or dysfunctional communication or damaged relationships or misunderstanding or things that are undesirable. I'm going to give a few examples from scripture just to help illustrate this. But the principle of non-violent communication, this is Marshall Rosenberg, who's now deceased, but he has a whole school that he left behind for maybe 30, 35 years, mostly in America, but also Canada and different places in the world he went, and gave seminars on nonviolent communication. This is at a time when compassion, the Buddhism has become very popular in the past couple of decades. This is before Buddhism was on the screen, on the wave of popularity. So compassion and compassionate speech was a new thing. But people bought into it because he's right. And part of what he did, as you see, he has these puppets. On one side is a jackal, and even in Hito Pradesh, a jackal is like a low animal creature, not a lovable one. And the other one is a giraffe. And he explains, because I saw some of the videos of his teaching, he used a giraffe because proportionate to his body size even, the heart of a giraffe is huge. And so he would give an example of jackal speak and giraffe speak. Harsh, non-caring, insensitive, saying something, but saying it in a way that is the opposite of what Krishna says is austerity of speech. Not pleasing, not beneficial, and so forth. It's an important, for the maturing of our Krishna consciousness, it's very important to learn this art. In chapter 16 of Bhagavad Gita, another scriptural reference, Divine and Demoniac chapter, the first 3 verses is divine qualities, and compassion is one of them. We covered this yesterday evening. Is the quality that divine people live by, and we're not divine yet, so we have to cultivate it. And cultivate it primarily based upon wanting to please Krishna. Let us not forget Krishna, whatever we do, even trying to cultivate a divine quality like compassion. The rocket fuel for us is we want Krishna to be pleased. That's the motivational impetus for us in our lives as devotees. The contrasting, bad example, one of them is Ramchandra Puri. Ramchandra Puri was the godbrother of Ishwara Puri. Ishwara Puri was Lord Chaitanya's spiritual master. And between the two, Ishwara Puri and Ramchandra Puri, one was a very humble, dedicated, self-sacrificing disciple, and the other was a critic, even of his spiritual master, Madhavendra Puri. So much so that when Ramchandra Puri was criticizing Madhavendra Puri, to see your face again. You can go wherever you like. It just, so after that, Ramchandra Puri, he continued to live somehow, but his program was just, he would travel here and there as a renunciate and look for an opportunity to criticize people. Now, in modern times, you don't even have to go somewhere, you just go on the internet. It's filled with it. But, he didn't have internet then, so he went here and there, and when he visited Lord Chaitanya, he couldn't find anything. So then he made something up. The artist illustration is, he saw some ants moving about on the floor. Now, anyone who's spent a little time in India knows that ants move about on the floor. And he saw some ants, and ha! You're eating sweets. What's the business of a sannyasi? Eating too many sweets, you'll fall down. Aha! Caught you red-handed. Now, that was not austerity of speech. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was not responsive. He didn't defend himself. He didn't say, anything. He could have done all kinds of things. Instead, another criticism was, you're eating too much, so he ate half. Everyone was so distressed. They wanted Ramchandra Puri to leave. Finally left. But the lack of austerity of speech causes offense. And offense causes a problem for the offender. So we want to be careful. We want the austerity of speech not just out of fear, but we want Krishna to be pleased. This is another nice painting of Vidura, who we know as Yamaraj, who took birth as Vidura by some curious arrangement of Krishna, that he would take birth as a Sudra. And even he was born from the Ambika's maidservant. So therefore, because he was born of the maidservant, he was known as a Sudra. He was also known as the highly learned, highly qualified, most respected member within the royal family, because he's Yamaraj, is one of the Mahajans, along with grandfather Bhishma, greatly respected. When Vidura was insulted by Duryodhana, he took it as a godsend, because he had tried and tried and tried. And there's an explanation in Mahabharata. One time he spent the whole night hammering on his elder brother, Dhritarashtra. Stop this intrigue. You're going to ruin the whole dynasty, and so forth and so on. Dhritarashtra remained unmoved. He didn't complain, object or something. He was too attached. Couldn't do it. So finally, when Duryodhana insulted him again in the public assembly, he just left. He didn't leave like, I'm fried, as they say in ISKCON. He understood that there's no service for me here. And so he left. And he was relieved, because he would have been in a difficult situation like grandfather Bhishma. I'm being maintained by the royal family, and so I'm obliged to take their side if the war comes, or when the war comes. So it's described, he took his bow and arrow and placed it at the doorstep and left, and didn't even say goodbye to his wife. He just left. And went on pilgrimage for a long time, according to the Bhagavatam. And Mahabharata, do the calculation, it comes out to something like 33, 34 years. That's a long pilgrimage. Just like just get in a taxi and ride around Govardhan Hill and go back to Delhi. 34 years. And in the course of those 34 years, he met Maitreya. On Krishna's indication to Uddhava that that's what Vidura is going to come soon, tell him, go hear from Maitreya. And after that, he came back to Hastinapur. And when he came back to Hastinapur, the Pandavas were so happy. Vidura, you're back. Please tell us about your travels. And how is Krishna? And that's one question he didn't answer, because austerity of speech, it would be very painful for the Pandavas to hear about Krishna's departure and the whole Yadu dynasty departure. Although he knew it, he didn't bear the bad news. He just avoided discussing. It's right in the purport explaining why. Because it would agitate the mind of the Pandavas. And there's a Chanakya Pandit statement that says, it's not advisable to bear a bad news, because the bad feeling that someone has about the bad news goes to the person who delivered the bad news. Now sometimes you have to. There's a death in the family, or something you have to. But not like, the modern times where something bad happens, it's all over ISKCON in 15 hours, because people just love giving bad news. Eventually you may hear some good news, but the bad news travels fast. So, yet, in that same return visit to Hastinapur, he spoke very strongly to Dhritarashtra. So strongly, you're living like a dog, living off the scraps of Bhima. Get out. Because he was too attached. But now he had not only, knowledge, he had become an Uttama Bhakta through this pilgrimage and Maitreya's association, exactly what the Bhagavatam says. So, and he had the position, although he was the younger brother of the two, he had knowledge. In age he was younger, but in wisdom he was far superior. So he accepted that position again, only now fully enlightened and purified by all of what he had done. And he was able to convince Dhritarashtra to leave. And so he did. Now there's other examples in the scripture where one is very careful about what you explain in giving knowledge of events. Like, Arjuna. When Arjuna had gone to Dwarka, because Krishna had departed back to Dwarka after Maharaj Yudhishthira's installation, he had gone with this anticipation that the Pandavas just kind of intuitively knew Krishna was going to depart. So Arjuna went. And he was gone a long time. And there were auspicious signs indicating something very terrible and had happened, or was going to happen. And Yudhishthira understood, but he didn't want to say. And when Arjuna finally came back, Arjuna didn't want to say. But he had to say, he blurted it out and began crying. Arjuna began crying, weeping, with the pain of separation from Krishna. And he then went on speaking about the kindness of Krishna and the mercy of Krishna and the wonderful activities of Krishna. And then he started remembering Krishna's instructions that he had given Arjuna very kindly in Bhagavad Gita on the battlefield. And he started feeling enlivened again. And then he realized that was Krishna's kindness, to give him the sense of connection with Krishna just through his words. So that's how one can take shelter and solace even when we hear bad news, is the eternal truths that Krishna gives in Bhagavad Gita, and the eternal truths about Krishna we receive from Srimad Bhagavatam. And that's compassion. It's part of the stimulation for ecstatic love that comes from topics about Krishna, despite the temporary body, mind, and emotions that may churn in our life. We direct them towards the pleasure of Krishna. And our founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, this is, by the way, in New York, and I chose this slide in particular because this was a Vyasa-san, a lotus-looking, these are lotus petals, Vyasa-san, that was a very special offering to Srila Prabhupada. So he gave us these teachings that are meant to connect us to Krishna, and by being connected to Krishna, then compassion can awaken, because by being connected to Krishna as part of Krishna's quality, our quality becomes awakened, which is also the same as Krishna's quality, although very, very tiny in comparison, quantity-wise. And the material tendency, last night we spoke about misplaced compassion. Very simple example, but Prabhupada would speak about the saving the coat of a drowning man. Great. And the man drowned. You saved his coat. So the real difficulty of the living entity is the material condition of life. And the material condition of life is due to ignoring Krishna. So the cure of material existence, not only somebody's hungry, or somebody needs medical treatment, or somebody needs education, so opening of hospitals, schools, and feeding people, is a misplaced, that's the coat of the drowning man. Because after the meal, then what? And not only, well, you can teach them how to grow food, but you know, they're still in this condition of ignorance. The root cause of all suffering is ignorance. It's a very important point. It's like the difference between Buddhist compassion and Vaishnava compassion. The Buddhist teaching, is it popular here in this area, Buddhism? Becoming more popular? So, Buddhist teaching is the root cause of suffering is desire. How to get free from suffering? Become free from desire. How do you become free from desire? Mindfulness meditation. And when you do that mindfulness meditation, you're still in a desire, and then you get on the other side of desire. And what's on the other side of desire? Nirvana. What's nirvana? Nothing. And that's reality. What's the goal? Nothingness. Desirelessness. Prabhupada's teaching is, no. The root cause of suffering is ignorance. And from ignorance comes ignorant desire. And from ignorant desire comes ignorant behavior. And from ignorant behavior comes suffering. The root is ignorance. You want to relieve people, you want to be really compassionate, relieve people of ignorance. It's not just by taking a stick and whacking them. It's by a gradual process of hearing spiritual sound vibration and connecting that spiritual sound vibration with the soul's natural tendency of anukulyena Krishna Shilanam. Devotion to Krishna is pleasing and favorable. The gift of bhakti is the gift that removes ignorance. Yes? Vasudeve Bhagavati bhakti yoga prayojataha janiyati ashu vairagyam jnanam cha yadahaitakam. Knowledge that destroys ignorance arises naturally from bhakti. Try to give somebody knowledge that doesn't have bhakti, and it gets distorted fast. Have you noticed? Or it just bounces, and people say no. Or they don't, they're a little more polite, they don't exactly say no, they just smile and but it's a no. It doesn't go in. But so the real solution for suffering is bhakti. Because bhakti brings transcendental knowledge that arises from the soul, connects with Krishna, and when that connection with Krishna is there, then all these good qualities, the ocean of good qualities, become the decoration of a devotee. Harava bhaktasya mato mahat guna. For those who are devotees, they become naturally decorated with good qualities like compassion when bhakti awakens. And those that are not, they're riding on the chariot of the Mano Ratha, not Ratha Yatra. Mano Ratha, the chariot of the mind. So let's see if there's any 10 after 9. Any discussion, comments? You have something? No? Yes.
Sometimes you're caught in a situation where you're afraid to speak the truth because, as you said, you agitate the mind of the person.
Yeah.
However, in a situation where you have to say something because otherwise there will be consequences that are not desirable. So is that still okay to be silent and maintain the austerity of speech, or there are exceptions to that?
Well, yeah, there's choices. One choice is speak it later, when the circumstance is right. Another choice is speak to somebody who is in the position of an authority. That is more of a position than you may be in a position to speak the truth. Another is you go to your deity and you pour your heart out before your deity. Now, depends on what the consequences are and severity and so forth. So this is, I'm sitting up because it's a really important point in devotee behavior and devotee relationships. Immaturity, conditioned life is you don't have any discrimination. And immaturity is to have the capacity to distinguish truth. What is to be done, what is not to be done, etc. Because we know from Bhagavad Gita, knowledge in the mode of ignorance is just the opposite. And when there's mode of goodness, there's a distinction between what is to be done, what is not to be done. So, when there's seeing what is to be done, then there's this sense of I have to speak it. I have to speak the truth. I have to speak the truth, Prabhu. So now, we don't want that one, but you're not suggesting that one. But sometimes, so then if we say something or do something, there's consequences. Exactly your point. That's maturity. My response is, if we don't say something, there's consequences. If we do say something, there's consequences. How do you weigh those consequences? Well, when somebody is in that maturity space, Krishna helps. The first lesson of the whole Puranic portion of the Bhagavatam is Arjuna with this dilemma of kill Ashwatthama, not kill Ashwatthama. And what we hear Prabhupada saying is Krishna, because there's arguments, if you do this or don't do this, and here's justification for doing this, here's a justification for don't doing this. And Arjuna has to weigh it all. So we sometimes have to weigh it all. And the glory of Arjuna is, he knew, because Krishna gave him the understanding what to do. So we may not be so Krishna conscious, but we have to weigh. That's maturity. When we say the truth, how's it, or do the right thing, either, how's it going to impact others? That pause space, it's maturity in the mode of goodness, both. And there's not always a clear answer. But if we ask the question, you're more likely to get an answer than if you don't ask the question. Just, be silent, or just say it, close your eyes and hope the consequences aren't bad because you said it. And the higher principle I began with is Krishna should be pleased. Now again, that's not so easy to understand, but if that's the motivation, then you're more likely to get an answer of which path to move on, because there could be a dozen possible responses that you're not thinking of because you're not in that mature space thinking, how should Krishna be pleased and how are different people going to be impacted? You just cultivate that. That's cultivation of Krishna Bhakti. And you'll get better at it. You'll make some mistakes along the way.
Is sugarcoating the truth an option?
Well, discretion is the better part of valor. It's not like, tell a half-truth. But, we have scriptural examples of that too. Sanatana Goswami speaking to the prison keeper. Just tell the king, he had to go past stool and he jumped in with the chains on and he drowned. So then Prabhupada explains, for the higher cause, such speech is alright. But, we can't just, okay, Sanatana Goswami did it, so I got a higher cause here. We have to have qualification and proper discrimination. Ultimately, it's Krishna's to be pleased. That's the real test. So it's the refinement of consciousness, of Krishna consciousness. Yes, it is. It's an option. But best to be really careful. Because you go a little bit, and the next thing is a little bit more, the next thing is a little bit more, and then you're not in a good place. Compromised consciousness space. Krishna is to be pleased. Yes.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. My question is, let's say we have a close family member, and how far can we insist the family members to be in Krishna consciousness?
Well, I have some strong feelings about that, and the strong feeling goes, it's a better way to capture bees is with honey than vinegar. So, best is to be a good example and be so happy and so of such good quality that other family members will want.
Yes.
There's this nice story, I'll be short. Ralph Waldo Emerson, some of you know because it's in the back cover of Bhagavad Gita. He read Bhagavad Gita. So when he was old, he lived on a farm and he had a son. He was trying to get a young heifer into the barn. And they couldn't. He tried, his son tried, they both pushed, wouldn't move. So a maidservant came along, saw what they were doing, smiled, held her finger up in the air so they could see, put her finger in the little bowl that had salt, showed them the finger that now had salt on it, placed the finger before the heifer's mouth, and his tongue went out, and she just drew him into the barn.
Show them by example.
Yeah. So the attractiveness of Krishna consciousness is far more compelling than the pushing of Krishna consciousness. And the mind as well, and the family as well, and the world as well.
Thanks.
Yes.
Sometimes in the process of trying to control the urge of speech, we choose to remain silent.
Yes. That's a choice.
But that can hurt people as well in the same
Yes.
time. So how do we deal with that?
Well, depends on the person. And depends on the relationship with the person as well. Because sometimes you say something and that can hurt the person. Not say something that can hurt the person. So you need to learn how to have a relationship. You need to know what the person's needs are and address their needs. And it may not be hearing or not hearing. It may be what the person's need is something else. And once that relationship is established, then you can say anything. This was a major part of 2.5 days from Dear Krishna Maharaj, and that is needs. There's a big chart. Needs in the middle, and strategy, and affective and motivational. So, what's the need of the other person? We should be very careful in our dealings that when relationships are right, just like in the family or with anybody, when the relationships are right, you can say almost anything. You'll say it. Now, part of the problem is taking the relationship for granted and then saying that same thing in a way that's not understanding the need, just because you take the relationship for granted. Familiarity, that kind of thing. And then the person may feel hurt, not by what you said, but how you said it. So, when invest in the relationships, put that up here, and then saying, not saying, follows that one. You may have to, depending upon the circumstance, you may have to say, could I have, some special moments where we can reveal our hearts? So you prepare the ground for something that, I'm debating whether to say or not say. And if I don't say, and if I say, it may cause. So the relationship with you is very important to me. So I want this private, one-on-one conversation where I want you to know you mean a lot to me. You don't have to use. You can use those words or whatever. That's the feeling. And now, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but this is a perception. This is my understanding, and because you're important to me, I want to convey it. But I don't want the bad result that you feel. Oh, why did you say that? Or why didn't you say that? Because the relationship is up here. It takes time to do those things. And there's risks involved. There's risks involved if you don't also. But the relationship in the long run is what's important. And ultimately it's for the pleasure of Krishna. Keep that in your mind, and then this confusion about how to proceed gets a little clearer. Not necessarily, in our case, not perfectly clear because we're not pure devotees yet. But it becomes clearer. Anything back here? No? Okay. Yes.
We see even in devotional service, there is a thin line between sense gratification and to gratify Krishna.
There's a thin line between satisfying Krishna and sense gratification.
Yes.
Generally it's a mix in our stage. So now what to do? What to do? you be cautious about, just like when you get in your car. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Cars are fast, very powerful. I know somebody that drives, they have a high-power car, and those persons that ride in their car, they're a little afraid. It's not in this country, but you get in your car and it's powerful. So best to be cautious. Don't drive, but best to be cautious. Not just take, insurance, but be cautious about how you drive. And if you have you're in the car with somebody that's not driving carefully, you let them know, look, we got valuable cargo here, devotees. So please. So, same. There's a mix, and we're going to do something. We have senses, Rishikena, Rishikesha, Sevanam, and there's a mix of it's not just for Rishikesh, it's, my own said, called the dovetail. So you're cautious on the one side, and you cultivate for Krishna's pleasure on the other side. This is kirtan. Young people, as far as I've seen, they like kirtan. There's lots of things about kirtan they like. There's the social aspect, there's the music aspect, and there's the whatever it is, the other things. They like it. And they get together, and then something besides Krishna consciousness can happen. So, how do you? One of the best things, the same principle. When you have a sincere young person, initially, my young devotee friend, you're going to be attracted to music, but once you learn the different melodies and your role as the mridanga player, harmonium player, vocalist, or kartal player, whatever. The real happiness is sing for Krishna. Be in the kirtan for Krishna and Krishna's pleasure. When you have that kind of focus, the greatest happiness is yours. And you miss it, and it's just, so you go to Krishna message and be cautious on the other side. It's just an application example. And anything. Cooking. Lots of people in the Hare Krishna movement cook. And the principle is Krishna should be pleased. And from beginning to end. From the items that you purchase, and how you prepare it, and how you offer it, and how you honor it. Anything else?
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, I have a question.
Yeah.
To what extent we can follow astrology while we are in Krishna consciousness?
To what extent we can do what?
We can astrology. To what
Astrology.
extent?
Well, Prabhupada's answer was, if you know it's going to rain, you may carry an umbrella. Do I need to explain? You got it. Before I came to Toronto, I was concerned in how cold, how warm, because I'm traveling with one suitcase and I want to make sure, I heard about the winter up here and I was thinking, oh my God. So now I got an idea because I checked and I found with the weather. So okay, now I'm prepared. But it's not going to change what the weather is. Astrology may tell you what influences may be coming your way, but that doesn't change the influences that are coming your way. You may prepare yourself this way, that way, but you don't make your decisions. Prabhupada didn't give much weight to it. He consulted, but he didn't give much weight to it. And perhaps, one might conjecture, he was training us to not put much value in it. Consulting but not placing value. That's how I take it anyway. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, some of you may know this from his biography, when he was still a teenager, he was the most renowned astrologer in all of India. And there were some, really elderly, senior astrologer people in India. And his scholarship, his aptitude was recognized throughout the country. That's where he got Saraswati title from that. But then he stopped. And he explained, because it's material. I'm interested in transcendence. Not that he didn't know. He would observe some things. I learned this one from Burichan. I'm going to end with this. Burichan, some of you know, Prabhupada disciple Burichan. He went to the same university that I did, along with 30 other very senior devotees that became devotees from the same university, like Lakshmi Modi. She's staying here in Toronto. She came from the same university, that little city on the other side of Niagara Falls, that one. I forgot what I was going to tell you a little bit about that story. Huh?
To what extent can we follow astrology while we are
Burichan. Burichan. Thank you. So, Burichan, I spent some time teaching at the Vrindavan Institute for Higher Education when Burichan was running it. He was like, a front runner in so many things. So, I was teaching there, and we would have lunch together every day, because we had this strong friendship when we went to college. And he found out that I was going to be leaving on a Thursday. He sat up and said, "What time of day Thursday?" I said, "Well, I was planning to leave to go to Delhi in the afternoon for the morning flight." He said, "Oh, Bhaktisiddhanta would never travel on a Thursday afternoon." I never heard that one before. But then he gave me this Brahminical trick. He said, "Pack your bag in the morning, because then your journey has begun." But okay, thank you very much. You may carry an umbrella.
Thank you.
Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Now I brought some Maha Prasadam from Kishore Kishori Temple, and I'd like to go away with an empty box. And one other thing, after I do that, I have with me in my backpack some flash drives from a recent visit to Yatra with a few hundred devotees to. Is everything all right back there? Okay. To Dwaraka and Ayodhya. Now I had never been to Dwaraka before this yatra, but I learned a lot, and I spent maybe a few hundred hours preparing for it. And all the katha is recorded, and the places we went, and the kirtan, 24-hour kirtan, party devotee, people in the kirtan. So, Dwaraka, and then Ayodhya, Chitrakoot, Naimisharan is nearby, so we went there, and a few other places. It's all on these little flash drives, 32 gigabyte flash drive. There's some cost for the flash drive in the production, so I'm requesting a donation, but it's a service to take devotees there, and those that can't go there, I'll put it in your hand. You can see me afterwards, if you're interested, after I give out the Mahaprasada. And there's some service that I've been doing for ISKCON for a number of years, and it requires some financial assistance, so what I'm asking is for the Dwaraka, a $50 donation, because the flash drive in the production is around 20. So something that can help me with my service, if you'd like. If you don't have it, that's okay. I'll give it to you anyway. And if you don't have with you today but you like it, that's okay, I'll give it to you anyway, and you can give to Sachimata sometime. So I want to do some service for ISKCON and for y'all. So here comes the Mahaprasad. Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah.